Here is the detailed script for the provided section. The room was not loud when Harry heard the words. That was what made it unbearable. No shouting, no palace spectacle, just a solicitor's measured voice, a sealed file on polished wood, and one sentence that changed everything. Elizabeth's private letters had named Anne as sole heir to a hidden royal inheritance. For Harry, it was not merely a legal revelation. It was a personal blow from beyond the grave. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Harry did not lean back. He froze. His eyes stayed fixed on the file, as though the paper had become a locked door, and each silence made that door heavier. Across the table, Charles sat rigid, one hand pressed flat near the edge, troubled by a truth his mother had carried, without placing it in his hands. This mattered because the inheritance was not just property. It was a private royal legacy. Assets, memories, and instructions kept outside the crown. The solicitor placed 3 letters in front of them with care. A solicitor is a lawyer who handles legal documents and formal instructions. And this one spoke as if every word had survived challenge. Elizabeth's handwriting matched. The dates aligned. The instructions repeated the same decision. Anne, not Harry, not Charles, had been named sole heir to the concealed inheritance. The phrase sole heir meant one chosen recipient with legal priority over all others, and the meaning landed like a sentence. Anne did not smile. She lowered her eyes, and that single movement stripped the room of any idea of victory. She looked wounded, as though being chosen by the Queen had placed a stone on her chest rather than a crown in her hands. Harry saw her restraint and felt something sharper than anger. He felt excluded from a private circle he believed blood should have guaranteed. Charles understood why that pain mattered. Because a son can survive disappointment, but rejection cuts differently. Harry finally moved. His fingers touched the table, then pulled back, as if even the polished wood belonged to a world that had shut him out. He looked from the solicitor to Anne, then toward Charles, searching for denial or rescue. None came. The king's silence told him the letters were real. Anne's silence told him the choice had weight. Then Harry asked the question that chilled every breath in the room. Why was he never told these letters existed? But the answer to Harry's question was not hidden in the solicitors. Anne's file alone. It was written across the faces of the people sitting beside him. Here is the detailed documentary-style script, based on your provided section. Every royal crisis begins with documents, but it becomes unforgettable because of people. Around that table sat a wounded son, a burdened king, a chosen daughter, and a family still haunted by Elizabeth's silence. Harry wanted recognition. Charles wanted peace. Anne wanted duty without drama. Yet the letters had done what no one in the palace had dared to do. They had exposed the private hierarchy of trust. Harry had entered that meeting believing he was walking into clarification, not judgment. He expected details, perhaps explanations, perhaps some guarded legal language that could still leave space for hope. Instead, he found himself facing a decision that made him feel pushed outside Elizabeth's final circle. The wound was not only in what had been given to Anne, it was in what had been withheld from him. For Harry, the hidden inheritance suddenly became proof of a deeper exclusion, one that no public title, no old memory, and no family smile could soften. Anne remained still, but her stillness carried its own story. She had spent years doing the hardest duties quietly, taking on the journeys, the ceremonies, the bleak conversations, and the thankless rooms that rarely brought applause. She had never needed the palace to praise her. She had never chased sympathy. That was why the Queen's letters cut so deeply through the silence. They suggested that Elizabeth had seen something in her daughter that others had overlooked. A kind of loyalty that did not ask to be rewarded, only trusted. Harry's shock deepened when the solicitor explained that the letters were not rushed notes or emotional fragments. They were a sequence of deliberate instructions, preserved over years, each one confirming the same private decision. The inheritance was not merely money. It carried personal assets, private instructions, and family memory. That was what made the choice devastating. Elizabeth had not just chosen who would receive something, she had chosen who would protect it. Charles felt the room slipping away from him. He could sense Harry's pain sharpening with every sentence, but he could also hear his mother's authority in every word read aloud. The king wanted to defend his son from humiliation, yet he knew the late monarch's written wishes could not be brushed aside like an uncomfortable conversation. He looked at Anne, then at the file, and the weight of both roles pressed down on him. Father and sovereign, comforter and custodian. Anne quietly touched the edge of one envelope. It was a small gesture, but it changed the room. Harry saw it and understood that she had carried some shadow of this burden longer than anyone recalled. Not triumph, not surprise. Something heavier. Then he turned toward Charles, waiting for support, waiting for the king to say there had been a mistake, waiting for one word that might reopen the door. But Charles could not immediately meet his eyes, and the silence from Charles told Harry that this wound had begun long before the solicitor opened the first envelope, long before the letters were read aloud. There had been one moment Elizabeth never erased from memory. It was not a scandal in public. It was not a headline. It was a private rupture after a family ceremony, when loyalty, restraint, and entitlement collided behind closed doors. Those who saw Elizabeth afterward remembered only one thing. The Queen had gone quiet in a way that meant a decision had been made. Elizabeth had spent years watching the difference between service and expectation. She understood that inheritance could be more than wealth. It could become a test of character, a burden that exposed whether someone wanted to protect history or possess it. That fear had grown slowly inside her, sharpened by private conversations, strained family visits, and moments when old bonds felt less like love and more like negotiation. The Queen saw how easily personal royal holdings could turn into weapons if placed in hands, guided by hurt. Anne stood apart in Elizabeth's mind, because she had never treated duty like a performance. She accepted difficult journeys, uncomfortable ceremonies, and thankless obligations without asking the palace to applaud her pain. The monarchy had often depended on her steadiness when louder figures took the attention. And that mattered because Elizabeth believed private inheritance needed a guardian, not a claimant. Anne's strength was not loud. It was disciplined. It was useful. It was exactly the kind of loyalty the Queen trusted when everything else felt fragile. Then came the moment that changed everything. After a Windsor Thanksgiving ceremony, a private family gathering meant to honor service and continuity, Harry challenged Elizabeth about why his branch of the family had been kept outside certain private estate discussions. A private estate means property or assets owned personally by the family, not by the crown as an institution. Harry wanted answers. He wanted a place. He wanted proof that distance had not erased his claim. Elizabeth listened calmly at first. She had heard pain before, and she had forgiven sharper words than these. But the conversation shifted when Harry implied that birthright should guarantee access to personal family holdings. That single idea struck her harder than anger would have done. It suggested that legacy could be demanded rather than earned. It suggested that blood alone could outweigh restraint, service, and trust. The Queen did not raise her voice. She did something far more final. She withdrew. Anne entered later that evening and found Elizabeth alone, still wearing her gloves, as though the monarch had never fully returned from the confrontation. The silence told Anne enough. The Queen did not explain everything, but she spoke with the cold calm of someone protecting the future from a coming storm. That night, Elizabeth dictated the first of the letters, naming Anne as the person best suited to preserve the inheritance without turning it into a battlefield. Charles knew about the confrontation after the ceremony. He knew Harry had left wounded, and he knew his mother had been disturbed. But the king never knew how deeply that exchange had settled inside Elizabeth, or that it had pushed her toward a decision that would one day stun the entire family. What began as one private conversation after a ceremony now returned years later as a legal blade cutting through the heart of the family. The confrontation did not explode at first. It tightened. Harry rose from his chair, not in fury alone, but in disbelief. Across from him, Anne remained still, carrying the expression of someone who had endured storms before and refused to perform pain for anyone. Charles watched them both, knowing that this was no longer about letters. It had become a reckoning between two versions of loyalty. Harry looked directly at Anne, and the question came out sharper than he intended. Did she know? Did she know Elizabeth had chosen her as sole heir before the solicitors placed those letters on Typh? The table? A sole heir means the one person legally named to receive and control a specific inheritance. And for Harry, those two words felt like a locked gate slammed shut from inside the family. He had expected confusion. He had expected room to argue. Instead, he found Anne steady, and that steadiness wounded him more deeply than any outburst could have done. Anne answered with restraint. She said she knew the Queen trusted her, but she did not know the full contents until the solicitors confirmed them. Her words were careful, but not cold. That only made the moment harder. Harry wanted anger, because anger could be fought. He wanted denial, because denial could be broken. Anne gave him neither. She gave him discipline, and in his pain, he mistook that discipline for triumph. Charles felt the table becoming a battlefield. He placed one hand down, hoping the simple gesture might slow what was happening between his son and his sister. But the king's voice did not carry enough force to stop it. He was trapped between the living and the dead, between Harry's hurt and Elizabeth's final instruction. The room understood why this mattered. If Charles challenged the letters, he would weaken his mother's authority. If he defended them too strongly, he would deepen his son's humiliation. Anne finally pushed back, but she did not raise her voice. She told Harry that duty is not proven by anger, and love is not measured by possession. The words struck him because they turned the whole argument upside down. He had walked into the room believing exclusion was the injury. Anne was forcing him to face something worse. That Elizabeth may have seen inheritance not as comfort, but as responsibility. Not as reward, as burden. Then, the solicitor read the passage no one could soften. Elizabeth had written that the inheritance must be protected from emotional pressure, public bargaining, and family division. A solicitor, as the lawyer responsible for reading and confirming formal instructions, gave those words a weight no family argument could erase. Harry stepped back. He did not need anyone to say his name. The sentence had already found him. Yet the most painful part was still ahead, because the letters did not merely choose Anne. They explained why power had been placed in her hands. Power in the monarchy rarely announces itself with thunder. Sometimes it appears as a signature beneath a private instruction. Sometimes it rests in a locked folder no one dares to open. In this case, Elizabeth had done something devastatingly precise. She had separated sentiment from stewardship, family affection from legal control, and memory from ownership. Anne was not being rewarded. She was being entrusted. Charles reached for the next page, as though it might offer relief, but the words only tightened the trap around him. The authority clause gave Anne control over how the inheritance would be guarded, distributed, preserved, or withheld. An authority clause means the part of a legal instruction that explains who has the power to make decisions, and in this case, the power did not rest with the king. It rested with his sister. Charles set the page down without speaking, shaken by how final Elizabeth's language sounded. Harry understood the meaning before anyone had to explain it again. Appealing to Charles would not save him. The king could comfort him as a father, but he could not undo what Elizabeth had written as a monarch and as a mother. That was why the moment mattered so deeply. It stripped Harry of the one path he thought remained, a private appeal through family emotion. Charles had authority over the crown, but not over this final act of trust. Anne felt the burden intensify with every sentence. She had not been handed a prize. She had been given responsibility over memory itself. The inheritance carried more than personal assets. It carried letters, instructions, objects, and choices Elizabeth wanted protected from becoming weapons in the family's public wounds. Anne understood that one wrong move could turn private history into spectacle, and her restraint suddenly looked less like calm and more like fear held under discipline. The solicitor continued, and the room seemed to close around the words. Elizabeth had feared the inheritance might become a symbol in public disputes, emotional bargaining, or royal exile narratives. A royal exile narrative means a public story built around distance from the family, often shaped by hurt, separation, and claims of rejection. Harry heard that phrase and stiffened, because it touched the deepest part of his humiliation. Anne did not look at him, but her silence made the sentence land harder. Then came the second sealed note. The solicitor confirmed that Anne had discretion over access, meaning she could decide who saw, used, or approached what Elizabeth had placed under her care. Harry could not demand entry. Charles could not simply open the door for him. Anne now stood between the inheritance and everyone who might pull it into conflict. Outside the room, Camilla was informed in careful words, and she instantly understood what had shifted. Camilla knew Charles had lost the power to soothe this crisis with charm, sympathy, or royal compromise. Once Camilla heard what Elizabeth had done, the fallout moved beyond the legal table and began spreading through the palace corridors. Fallout does not always arrive as a public announcement. Sometimes it begins with a door closing softly, a phone call unanswered, a private secretary changing the wording of a briefing. By evening, the palace understood that Elizabeth's letters had altered more than inheritance. They had redrawn emotional territory. Harry was no longer arguing with a family preference. He was confronting a final instruction from the late queen. Palace aides moved first, because the machinery of monarchy reacts quickly when emotion threatens order. Discussions about the inheritance were restricted to Anne and the appointed legal representatives, meaning the matter could no longer drift through family conversations, private appeals, or sympathetic whispers. A legal representative is someone officially authorized to handle a formal matter, and that detail mattered because it removed the comfort of ordinary family negotiation. Harry was not being kept outside a room by dislike. He was being kept outside by instruction. Harry stood alone near a corridor window, gripping his phone as if one call might still change everything. But every name he considered led back to the same wall. Charles could not overturn the letters. Anne would not treat them lightly. The solicitor had already warned that any challenge would force Elizabeth's private reasoning into wider exposure, and that would make Harry's position more painful, not less. The realization cut through him slowly. There was no quick appeal, no hidden shortcut, no private rescue waiting in another chamber. Charles retreated to his study with the heaviness of a man caught between love and law. He wanted to soften Harry's humiliation, because a father sees the wound before he sees the rule. Yet the king also knew why Elizabeth's wishes mattered. If he bent them now, he would not simply comfort his son, he would weaken his mother's final judgment. That conflict made him look older, not because he lacked power, but because power had finally met a boundary it could not cross. Camilla sat with Charles later, urging caution in the careful tone of someone who understood palace damage. She knew sympathy could become dangerous if it sounded like resistance to Elizabeth. Charles admitted that his mother's letters had left him almost no room to maneuver, and the queen consort heard what he could not say plainly. The crisis had taken control away from him. Across the palace, Anne made her own request. No celebratory language, no suggestion of triumph. The inheritance was to be described as a responsibility, never a prize. Harry could feel the new reality forming around him. He refused to leave through the main entrance, not out of strategy, but because he could not bear to be seen wounded. He chose a side corridor, carrying humiliation where no statement could reach it. But avoidance could not hold forever, because before the night ended, Harry and Charles would have to speak without lawyers between them. When Harry finally stood opposite Charles, there were no solicitors, no aides, and no carefully prepared phrases. Just a father and son, divided by a dead queen's handwriting. The room felt smaller than any palace chamber should. Charles looked older in that moment. Harry looked less angry than wounded. For the first time all day, the crisis stopped being constitutional and became painfully human. Harry did not begin with accusation. He began with the question that had been growing inside him since the letters were read. Did Elizabeth trust Anne more than she loved him? The words came out low, but they carried the weight of years, distance, headlines, family strain, and the hunger to know whether the Queen's final silence had been judgment or protection. Charles heard the pain beneath it, and for once, the king did not answer as a sovereign. He answered as a father, standing in the wreckage of a son's belief. Charles chose each word carefully, because one careless sentence could turn grief back into rage. He told Harry that Elizabeth's love and Elizabeth's trust were not always expressed through inheritance. Inheritance means what a person leaves behind after death. But in this case, it had become something far more dangerous, a measure of confidence, restraint, and responsibility. Charles wanted Harry to understand that being left outside the letters did not erase love. Yet he also knew the explanation would not heal the wound quickly. Harry paced as if movement could keep the truth from settling. He wanted to fight the decision, to push against it, to force the family to reopen what Elizabeth had closed. But the more he spoke, the clearer the danger became. Challenging the letters would not simply challenge Anne. It would drag the Queen's private reasoning into public conflict. It would turn Elizabeth's memory into a battlefield. And Harry could feel how cruel that would become, even to himself. Charles admitted something then that changed the temperature between them. He said he too felt judged by the letters. The king had inherited the throne, yet his mother's private thinking had escaped him. She had trusted him with the crown, but not with this hidden inheritance. That confession did not erase Harry's pain, but it cracked the wall between them. For the first time, Harry saw that Charles was not standing above the decision. He was standing beneath it too. Harry finally stopped pacing and sat down. Not in surrender, not in forgiveness, in exhaustion. He understood that the decision would stand, and that an immediate challenge would only deepen the damage. Charles watched him quietly, knowing the family had avoided open war by the thinnest margin. That private decision kept the family from open war, but it could not keep the outside world from discovering the shape of the wound. By morning, the story had escaped the palace walls. It did not arrive as a whisper. It landed like a verdict. Across Britain, the revelation became more than a royal inheritance dispute. It became a national argument about duty, exile, loyalty, and the late Queen's final judgment. And one image, on one front page, captured the mood better than any official statement ever could. A London newspaper carried the moment with brutal simplicity. Anne walked alone beneath the headline, "Elizabeth chose duty," while a smaller inset showed Harry leaving by a side entrance. His private pain turned into a public symbol. A front page is the first page of a newspaper, the place editors use for the story they believe defines the day. And this one did exactly that. It told Britain that the conflict was no longer locked behind palace doors. It had become a national mirror. Harry saw the image circulate, and the humiliation cut deeper, because it reduced a complicated, wound to one unforgettable contrast. Anne appeared steady. He appeared shut out. The story mattered because it transformed a family decision into a public judgment, forcing people to choose what they believed Elizabeth had valued most: blood, duty, service, or silence. Harry had tried to avoid the main entrance, but avoidance had only created the picture everyone remembered. A broadcaster framed the revelation as the late Queen's final act of trust, and those words hardened the public mood. Anne became the symbol of restraint, the daughter who carried responsibility without demanding applause. Harry became the face of exclusion, the son watching from the outside, as the last pieces of Elizabeth's private world closed around someone else. The broadcaster's framing mattered, because television does not merely repeat a story. It gives the public a way to feel it. Crowds gathered quietly outside Buckingham Palace, not cheering, not protesting, but reading updates on their phones near the gates with stunned curiosity. Buckingham Palace is the monarch's official London residence, and when people gather there, the message is never only about one family. It becomes about the monarchy itself. Some saw Anne's silence as dignity. Others saw Harry's side entrance image as proof of a wound that had never healed. The gates became a place where private grief met public debate. Anne said nothing, and that silence worked in her favor. She did not explain. She did not defend. She did not perform victory. Charles approved a restrained palace response, refusing to dispute the letters and signaling that Elizabeth's decision would be honored. The king understood that one wrong phrase could reopen the crisis, and Harry understood that the world had already begun writing its own verdict. When the noise faded, one truth remained inside the monarchy. Elizabeth's letters had not created the divide. They had revealed it. In the end, the most devastating part was not that Anne received what others expected. It was that Elizabeth had explained her choice with unmistakable clarity. Harry was blindsided because he believed family history still had room for negotiation. Charles was shaken because his mother's private judgment had outlived his authority. Anne was burdened because trust, once written in a queen's hand, becomes impossible to refuse. Harry carried the verdict with the pain of someone who had finally understood the boundary. Elizabeth's letters would stand. Anne would remain sole heir to the hidden inheritance, and the palace would accept the decision as final. A sole heir means the one person legally chosen to receive and control a specific inheritance, and that meaning now closed every door Harry had hoped might still open. This mattered, because the decision did not only settle property, it settled trust. It told the family who Elizabeth believed could protect memory without turning it into a phrase. Charles accepted the truth, with a sorrow he could not hide. Kingship had given him a crown, but it had not given him power over motherhood, memory, or the private decisions his mother made before death. The king could guide the monarchy, but he could not rewrite the queen's final judgment. He understood why Harry felt wounded, and Harry understood why Charles could not rescue him. That was the cruel balance of the moment. A father wanted to soften the blow, but a monarch had to honor the hand that had written it. Anne became the quiet center of the story. She had not defeated Harry. She had not outmaneuvered Charles. She had simply been trusted by Elizabeth to carry what others might have turned into conflict. The inheritance became more than a private royal legacy. It became a symbol of the late queen's final values. Restraint over spectacle. Duty over demand. Stewardship over entitlement. Anne's burden mattered, because she now protected not only objects and instructions, but the meaning Elizabeth wanted to leave behind. Harry left wounded, but not reckless. Charles remained burdened, but not defiant. Anne carried the legacy, without celebration, and that silence gave the verdict its final force. The family absorbed what could no longer be changed. The deepest trust had not followed noise, pressure, or public drama. It had followed the person who had spent a lifetime serving without asking to be seen. And so, the monarchy closed ranks around one final truth. Elizabeth's last act was not an act of rejection, but an act of judgment, and Anne was the one chosen to carry it. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.